Hi, this is Rabbi Orlofsky, and welcome to the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. And whether you're watching with our friends, our producers over at Torah Anytime, or wherever you watch and listen to your podcast, as always, we're happy to have you along. And we have a sponsor this week, and it's the sponsor from the last episode, not the Tisha B'Av episode, the one before that. And apparently I had given a misimpression, and he sponsored another episode to correct the mistake. Hi, K'vod Harav. I'm the same sponsor from the last episode. I just wanted to clarify that I don't deserve as much credit as it may have come off as. I have discovered the Rav's shiurim podcast about 6 years ago, when the podcast was still in its first few weeks. I think maybe episode 6 or somewhere around there. What are we up to, about 200? So there weren't that many podcasts yet at the time to catch up on. When I discovered it, though, I did go back to find and listen to all the Rav's previous shiurim that I could find online. Thank you again, K'vod Harav, for everything the Rav does and for all the chizzuk and inspiration that we all gain from the Rav's shiurim and podcasts. May the Rav always continue to inspire us, and may we all grow in Torah and all good things, and be zocheh to see mashiach and binyan, beit, hamikdash, and beyameinu. Amen. I mean, this is absolutely beautiful, but you understand, you've set me up, because obviously I should have made a mistake in this one, so then you would sponsor the next episode. Every time you sponsor, I'm going to have to make like a little mistake, and then you'll say, uh-oh, I better sponsor the next episode, so I correct that. But I think I got it right this time. I still think it's pretty impressive to be able to have listened to all the shiurim that we've put out in all the podcasts, and tremendous yashikayach, and Kadosh Baruch Hu should give you all good things and all good bracha. Nachamu, nachamu, ami. We are in a special period of time now, right? We're coming out of Tisha B'Av. Takes us a while to come out of Tisha B'Av. Took us 3 weeks to get here, and it went from bad to worse to worser. We went from the 3 weeks into the 9 days into Erev Tisha B'Av. Well, Erev Tisha B'Av this year was Shabbos. Baruch Hashem, a little better. And then go into Tisha B'Av, and then you go into the 10th of Av until it's over. And that's the period of time that we're in. Yeah. And now we come out of it. Leading up to it, we read the 3 haftarahs of Torah, where Kadosh Baruch Hu is telling us, get your act together and don't destroy the beit hamikdash. Stop. Of course, we were on a downward spiral. Things played out the way they did, obviously, this year, as it has for close to 2,000 years. We did not do tshuva. We did not change. We did not pull our act together. And how does it go? Winston Churchill said, man will occasionally stumble upon the truth, but he usually picks himself up and keeps going. And that's the story of the Jewish people. And once again, we have destroyed the beit hamikdash with our sins. Any generation where the beit hamikdash is not rebuilt, then you know that had it had been existing in our generation, it would have been destroyed. So we don't have to look at them and say, look at what they did. Look at us and say, look at what we did. It's always important to look at it from that point of view. Somebody was telling the Brisker Rav, look at these tziyonim, look at these tziyonim. And he said to them, Yonah Hanavi is on a boat filled with Ovdei Avodah Zarah, and there's a storm threatening to destroy the boat. And he says, this is because of me, not because of you. Kadosh Baruch Hu, it doesn't take you guys that seriously that he would bring a miraculous storm to destroy you, but I'm a Navi. He's coming after me, trust me. Brisker Rav says, let's talk about ourselves and look at where we are. We destroyed the beit hamikdash. Us, me and you. Yeah. I think it's fair to say that people who listen to the Rabbi Orlofsky show have probably worked a little harder to undo the damage, but we were not successful. We are Klal Yisrael, and we at the end of the day have to take responsibility. The sign of maturity is taking responsibility, as opposed to blaming things on other people. When a car bomb went off in Lebanon and killed over 200 Marines, Ronald Reagan said, "I'm the commander-in-chief. I'm not passing the buck. I'm not blaming it on anybody else. This is my responsibility, and I will take the consequences." He was an adult. When Bill Clinton lied under oath, his defense was, "It's not my fault. You shouldn't have asked me the question." That's the opposite of taking responsibility. So, okay, we understand. You know, we are where we are. Things have turned out. The 3 weeks ended with Tisha B'Av, and that's it. 3 weeks of Teichacha, 7 haftarahs of Nechama. Takes 7 weeks to make us feel better. For HaKadosh Baruch Hu to bring us to the point that we can go into Rosh Hashanah and feel like a mensch. It's going to take us 7 weeks of positive haftarahs, and we really should talk maybe at one point about L'chadodi, because L'chadodi basically takes lines from those 7 haftarahs to put it into perspective of what Nechama is, what the Geula can be, and that's really what we're focusing on now is Nechama. So I want to speak about Tu B'Av. Now I know I spoke about Tu B'Av many years ago, but I spoke about it more in the context of marriage. Because as we know, the Mishnah in Tainus says that the 2 happiest days of the year were Yom Kippur and on Tu B'Av, because on that day the girls would go out into the vineyards and dance, and the men would pick their brides and they would get married, and this was a very happy time. Now obviously it wasn't happy because they were dancing in the field, they were dancing in the vineyards because these were happy days, it was an auspicious time. And there's a lot that has to do with marriage on Tu B'Av, and that's what we talked about last time. And how the Geula is defined in the context of a Chassan and Kala. Od yishama ba'ara Yehuda v'chutzas Yerushalayim kol sasan v'kol simcha kol Chassan v'kol Kala. And we know that Moshe Rabbeinu said that the generation that was going to inherit Eretz Yisrael, they could only marry among their own Shvatim until they divvied up Eretz Yisrael, and that decree was rescinded on Tu B'Av. And we know that after the story of Pelegish V'Giva and Binyamin lost that terrible war, there was a gezerah that Binyamin was not allowed to marry into Klal Yisrael, and that was rescinded on Tu B'Av. So there's a lot of marriage concepts associated with Tu B'Av. But I want to focus on a completely different aspect of Tu B'Av. And Tu B'Av doesn't really get enough press. Tu B'Shvat gets a lot more press. And I would argue that Tu B'Av is nowhere as significant as Tu B'Av. Tu B'Shvat is the new year of the trees, of when we begin counting for Trumas and Maisris, when we pick the fruit, how you know which is Maisrid from last year to next year based on the Chanota, it's kind of technical. But Tu B'Shvat, first of all, comes out during the school year, and second of all, it has a nifty song. Tu B'Shvat Igiya Chag La'ilanot. Tu B'Av doesn't have a song. Tu B'Av. Tu, my love. Anyway, that's Tu Tootsie Goodbye by Al Jolson, who I don't think there's anybody alive who knows who that is. Anyway, but I live in the past because it was cheaper. Anyway, but Tu B'Av doesn't have a song, and it comes out during camp. It's not, But the Gemara tells us it's one of the happiest days of the year. It's a very, very special time. So I want to focus on one of the reasons the Gemara gives about why Tu B'Av is so happy. And obviously the message transcends Tu B'Av itself. It says that there were certain families who were selected to collect wood for the wood pile in the beit hamikdash. Only certain families were allowed to collect it, and only at certain times of the year. And they would collect the wood and bring it to the beit hamikdash, or go on the wood pile. And of course, Kohanim Baalei Mumin, who weren't allowed to do the regular avoda, they worked in the wood room, inspecting them to make sure there were no wormholes in them. And then they would bring up the 2 pieces of wood to the mizbeach to add to the fire. They stopped collecting the wood on Tu B'Av because it says the sun was losing its power. I don't know if you ever heard the expression, the dog days of August. August is pretty hot. Yeah. And in fact, the Gemara says that the end of the summer is hotter than the middle of the summer, because as it starts to go down, the heat has been building up in the world, so it's even hotter at the end than beforehand. Dog days of August, yeah. And yet, right at the beginning of August comes Tu B'Av, and we say, nope, can't collect the wood anymore because the sun is losing its koyach. So what does that make it a holiday on Tu B'Av for? It makes it a holiday because it's a siyum. When you finish something, you make a siyum. It's a celebration that we finished. So we know you finish a masechta, we make a siyum. We know that there are different times we make siyumim. Celebrate that we finished. Right? My grandchildren, I don't remember this when I was a kid, my grandchildren, every time they finish a masechta mishnayos, they have a siyum. Every time they finish one of the chumashim, they make a siyum. Every time they finish a parak of Gemara, they make a siyum. Yeah. But I understand the concept at least. It's to celebrate that we finished. And we know this when we finish a chumash, when we lay in shul, we all cry out, chazak, chazak, v'niz chazek. We should be strengthened. We made it through. It's an accomplishment. Yeah. So there's no question about it. We celebrate that. So it seems like certain families used to collect the wood for the beit hamikdash at certain times of the year, and they stopped on Tu B'Av, and therefore all of Klal Yisrael makes a celebration because of that. Seems a little sketchy on its surface, how exactly that's a simcha for all of Klal Yisrael. So I saw a vart many years ago. I remember it was in a Hasidic sefer of Vortlach. It was, I don't know which Rebbe he was quoting, but it stuck with me. And it says like this: what does it mean that the sun is losing its force? First of all, you know that the winter, the days are very short. And they stay very short for a long time until at some point we suddenly start getting later and later and later and later, so that the time we reach Pesach, we're at the equinox. And then it gets longer and longer and longer until we reach the summer solstice. And it stays long for a very long period of time. And then at some point it starts getting shorter. And someone pointed out to me the turning point is more or less Tu B'Av. And you start losing 7 minutes a week. And he says, where you can find it most is in Sovzman Kriyishma, he said to me. You can see how it starts getting, the time starts changing. It's, and it goes rapidly. Because from Tu B'Av to Sukkot, where we come to the fall equinox, you have a small period of time where you have to go from the longest days of the year to where it goes half and half. And so it's got to go there pretty rapidly. And so the time changes fast. So even though it might be pretty hot, the sun doesn't have the power that it usually does. Somebody asked me a question years ago. Why do the leaves change color in autumn? And I have to add a caveat to that because I live in Eretz Yisrael. And for the most part, the leaves don't change color. Deciduous trees change color. Oaks and maples and trees like that, the leaves change color. Why? And I said, they're not changing color. That's their real color. It's just because there's so much sunshine, it creates chlorophyll in the leaves, and the chlorophyll is green, and it makes all the leaves look green. And as the sunshine begins to diminish at the end of the summer, so there's less sunshine, less chlorophyll, and there's less green, and the real colors come out. And I said, it makes sense that Hashem set up the world that should happen around Rosh Hashanah, because on Rosh Hashanah, the essence is to be able to find out who you are. In Rosh Hashanah, everybody is judged as an individual. I remember Rabbi Orlofsky said once, why do we define Gehenna as Eish, as fire? There's not really any fire. Obviously, you're a neshama. Your body stays here. If you're nervous, save up your money and invest in cryogenics, and they'll wrap you in aluminum foil, put you in a freezer. You're not going to burn. And the soul can't burn. So it's obviously a mashal. I said this once to a group of yeshiva guys, and one guy said, don't tell me that. That's the only reason I get up in the morning. I said, we'll open a special section for you, for actual fire, But he says, why is that the mashal? He says, because when you burn something, the liquids are vaporized, the gases are released, and you're left with nothing but the essence. And that's what Gehenna is. Famous story with the Brisker Rav, where he says to this guy, who are you? And he says, I'm a sugar merchant. He says, okay. A few minutes later, he says, who are you? He says, I import sugar from the Caribbean. Okay. A few minutes later, he says, who are you? He says, in the Caribbean, they have sugar cane and they extract it. I have a factory down there and we make sugar and I bring it in. The Brisker Rav says, I didn't ask you what you do for a living. I asked, who are you? And that's why people's identity is so hard to define. Because we define ourselves from other people. I'm somebody's father or mother. I'm somebody's child. I'm somebody's sister or brother. I'm somebody's neighbor. I'm somebody's boss. I'm somebody's employee. I live here. I drive that. You don't really find this today when we talk about, based on where I live. There was a time when in Europe there was a Giltziana, Pailisha, it made a big difference, from Lita, it gave you a real identity. Today, I remember hearing, I forgot who said it, that one of the reasons that the Chofetz Chaim wrote the Mishnah Berurah, which was not that accepted in Europe, because it's all pshara. He takes all of the minhagim and tries to put it together. I think it was the Chazon Ish who said. He said because he saw that the Holocaust was going to come and all the communities would be destroyed, and therefore he wanted to come up with one minhag for Klal Yisrael because nobody would be a Glitziana, Pailisha anymore. I'm pretty sure I told this story, and if so, you'll indulge me. I'm sorry. There was a comedian, Alan King. He was very Jewish. He was very Jewish. He sent his daughter to Hank, the Hebrew Academy of Nassau County. And I remember seeing him many, many, many years ago on the Johnny Carson show, and he was talking about his son's bar mitzvah. He goes, and I told everyone, if you don't come to shul for the service, don't bother coming to the party. That was interesting. Anyway, he has this routine where he says, I had a grandfather, we used to call him Zaidi. And Zaidi used to say to me all the time, he used to say to me, no matter what happens, don't marry a Galiciana. I didn't know what a Galiciana was, but I loved my Zayda. I said, sure, Zayda. Anyway, I went off to college. I met a nice Jewish girl. We're dating. We're getting serious. I want to bring her home to meet my parents. I said, but I have one question for you. Are you a Galiciana? She says, what's a Galiciana? He says, I don't know. I'll go home and ask my parents. So he asked her parents. She comes back and says, yeah, I'm a Galiciana. I said, okay, now we have a problem. He says, why? I'll explain to you later. So he sits down with his Zayda, says, Zayda, I found a nice girl. She's a Jewish girl. She wants to have a kosher home. She wants to live a Jewish life. It's just one thing. She's a Galiciana. He says, absolutely not. He says, but why, Zayda? He says, no Galiciana. He says, why? He says, because Galicianas put raisins in their stuffed cabbage. He says, that's it? He goes, what, that's not enough? But today you don't really have Galiciana, you don't really have Polisha. You know, I'm a Polisha Yid. My father, both of his parents came from outside of Warsaw. You know, and some of this continues. I must have told this story. You know, but my cousin told me, my grandfather, there was a snowstorm and he was taking the bus. She says, Papa, why don't you take a taxi? He says, because every click of the meter is like a knife in my heart. That's a Polish Yid. They tell about a Polish Yid on his deathbed, and he says, hey, Chaimka, you here? He says, yeah. He says, Moshe, are you here? He says, yeah. Yankala, are you here? He says, yeah. Then who's in the store? So that's the idea. The idea is that a person can appreciate, Polish. That's how they were. They were really cheap. So I don't know if it's just cheap. It's also like very like, I don't need this. My father would say that. I don't that. Yeah. You know, that's how they used to talk. You know. So I'll give you an example. When I was getting ready for my heart surgery, so the doctor came in to speak to the family, and he says, "Listen, the operation will be tomorrow morning, Wednesday morning. He'll be unconscious till Friday morning, and and he'll be in intensive care, so you're not really going to be able to see him, until Friday morning." So my wife and my kids were discussing who's going to be here, who's going to be here then, and when and that. I said, "Do you hear him? I'm not going to be here. I'm going to be unconscious. You're not going to see me anyway." We were making a chassan in 2 weeks. I said, "Go home. Work on the chasana, do what you have to do. Come back on Sunday morning, put a little water in your eyes, say, I was outside crying, saying to him, I'll never know the difference. I don't need you here." The doctor, the surgeon, who was not from, he goes, "A Polish Yid. I didn't know they still had those." So that's pshat, not Polish Yid. So, okay, so it's inside of you. But today, do people really define their identity of, I'm a Polish, I'm a, there's this phenomena, I cannot explain it. Yeah, I leave it to my many Hasidic listeners out there. Someone told me I have a big following in Borough Park. And I always tell the story, I had these boys who were learning in a yeshiva in Bat Yam. Their first language was Yiddish. And they said they listened to the podcast. They wanted to come for a Shabbos meal, And he says, no, you have a big following by the Hasidim, But every now and then I asked a chassid, I said, what chassidus are you? He says, I don't really have a chassidus. I'm just like a chassid with a rebbe to be named later. I was like, how can you be a freelance chassid? Everybody knows that the rebbe has your nitzites of your neshama. He said, yeah, but, I like the lavush. I like the attitude. So this idea of identity, maybe from place, isn't there so much. But you do have that attitude by what I drive. I've seen that. Or my favorite, I've quoted this on more than one occasion. There was a commercial for a soft drink called Dr. Pepper. Yeah? And I have some of my aficionados, when I go to speak in America, they bring me a Diet Dr. Pepper because they know I can't get in there. It's one of my guilty pleasures, yeah? Diet Dr. Pepper. You can get regular Dr. Pepper here, but not Diet Dr. Pepper. Anyway, they had a jingle. I remember it to this day. It must be 40, 50 years ago. I drink Dr. Pepper and I'm proud. I'm part of an original crowd. And if you look around these days, you'll see that there's a Dr. Pepper craze. I'm a pepper, he's a pepper, you're a pepper. Wouldn't you like to be a pepper too? It's not that I drink Dr. Pepper. I am a pepper. I have become my soft drink. That is my identity. So you get up to Shemayim, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants to give you Olam Haba. But who are you? Can you define yourself not by your family or by your profession or by your soft drink or where you come from? Can you define yourself just by you? Moshe Shapiro said this once. He said, put somebody in a completely black room, really dark room, no light whatsoever. He says, why are they afraid? What makes them uncomfortable? He says, Histakel tachat hamita, ein shama mifletzet. He says, look under the bed, there's no monsters. You check the closet, there's no monsters. And I put you in a completely dark room. What makes us frightened? So what makes us frightened is we're conscious of nothing but our own identity. There's nothing but me. And that's scary. Because we don't know who we are. We don't spend time defining ourselves. So that's why the Gehenna is defined as fire, or described as fire, because it burns away everything until you're left just with the essence. HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants to reward you. But who are you? After we get down to the essence, after we see who you really are. That's very hard. It's very hard for people, yeah, to define ourselves. So when a person has to figure out who they are, which is what happens on Rosh Hashanah, there's a process. And so on Tu B'Av, it says the sun starts losing its power. And that's why I brought the mashal of the leaves. The leaves were always gold and crimson and burnt orange and all of those colors. Just the chlorophyll covered it up. And now when it all goes away, you get to see what they really are. And that's what we have to do in Rosh Hashanah. We have to... A person was created alone and is judged alone. Everybody passes before HaKadosh Baruch Hu k'bnei maron. Bnei maron can either mean like sheep that go single file, or like the army of Dovid HaMelech, which marched single file, or this mountain pass, Bnei Charon, which was very narrow and you can only go one at a time. And that's on Rosh Hashanah. We have to figure out who we are. But the reason the leaves start turning color is because even though it might be very hot out, but the sunlight is becoming less and less. So, okay. So what was this vart that I saw? It said like this. The Medrash Bereshis Rabbah says clearly that the Umas HaOlam are compared to the sun and the Jews are compared to the moon. That's why we tell time by the moon. We obviously also use the sun. Our calendar is a combination of solar and lunar. But our months, the way we tell time is by the moon. And the moon represents Klal Yisrael. What do I mean by that? There are 29 and a half days to a lunar month. Now, obviously, you don't want to start the new month in the middle of the day. So we make 6 months 29 days and 6 months 30 days. And one's a little early, one's a little late. And that's the way that it works out. So that means when you reach the end of that month, the Gemara says there are 6 hours where the moon disappears. You can't see it. And if anybody comes and says, I saw the moon at this time, then you know he's wrong. He's making a mistake. Can't be. The moon disappears for 6 hours at the end of each month. So what does that mean? All right? So what it means is like this. The Jewish people are like the moon, because the sun keeps blazing. But in this world, until Mashiach comes, the Jewish people wax and wane like the moon. And so we reach stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger until the full moon, and then we begin to wane and get less and less and less and less and less until we disappear. And then we reappear as a tiny little sliver in the sky. So, for example, the first generation of the Jewish people was Abraham. Abraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Levi, Kahas, Amram, Moshe. From Abraham to Yetzias Mitzrayim was 7 generations. It's another 7 generations till we get to Dovid HaMelech. Dovid HaMelech was the 14th generation, and Shlomo HaMelech was the 15th generation. The moon is full on the 14th and the 15th of the month. That's the full moon. And the Jewish people reached their height, obviously, under the reign of Dovid and Shlomo. And immediately after that, in the 16th generation, Rechavam and Yeravam, the kingdom splits in half, we begin waning. And it goes from worse to worse to worse until the northern kingdom is destroyed by Sancheriv and carried off into Gullus. And finally, in the last generation, in the generation of Tzidkiyahu HaMelech, the beit is destroyed, the Jewish people go into Gullus. Tzidkiyahu was the 30th generation. And that should have been the end. But just like the moon waxes and wanes, it began to wax again. And so we reappear in Bavel, and we start to rebuild, and then through Persia, and then we come back and build the second beit hamikdash, and then we reach a golden age once again, and then we fall apart. Once again, civil war between the two sons of Yanai, Hyrcanus and Aristobulus, and we split, and then Rome comes in, and it goes from bad to worse until the second beit is destroyed. We go into Gullus. And then we reappear in the great yeshivas in Bavel. And we slowly start to rise up, rise up, and rise up, rise up. And so it goes through Jewish history, where you have the golden age of the Jews in the Bali Taisvis, in France and Germany, and then they're destroyed. And then you have the golden age in Spain, and then it's destroyed. And you have the golden age in Poland, and then it's destroyed. And the Jewish people wax and wane throughout history. But there's going to come a time, and that's what we say when we say Kiddush HaChodesh. There's going to come a time when the moon is going to start to get brighter and brighter and brighter, and it's going to reach the 15th and get brighter and brighter and brighter until it's as bright as the sun. That's going to be most Mashiach. And that's why the whole bracha of Kiddush Levana is all about the power of the moon becoming as bright as the sun. That's going to be the Geula when that time comes. So look at the significance. The beit hamikdash is destroyed in the summer, Tammuz and Av, the 2 hottest months of the year, when the sun is at its greatest power. Shavaz B'Tammuz is almost always longer than Tisha B'Av. It's usually considered the longest of the fasts. I'm sure I mentioned this in the past. There's a mnemonic device for the Tanesim. It's black and white, before and after, long and short. Before is Tainus Esther, comes out before Purim. After, Tzom Gedalia, comes out after Rosh Hashanah. White is Yom Kippur. Black is Tisha B'Av. long, it's Shavas B'Tammuz. It's not 24 hours, but otherwise it's the longest, it ends the latest. I was just in England. We went to an early Ma'ariv at 10:10. And we were in London. So you go up to Gateshead. So Shavas B'Tammuz, they don't even, the kids can't stay up that late to break the fast. The ones who have a bar mitzvah already, they go to sleep. Sent to bed without their supper. They eat in the morning when they wake up because they just can't stay up that late. It's amazing. Yeah, Shavas B'Tammuz is very long, and short is obviously Asar B'Teves, and ends relatively early by comparison. So it's the days are very long. It's very hot. It's days of Churban. The Maharal says the worst time for the Jewish people is in the dead of winter. That's when Asar B'Teves takes place, and in the height of summer, because either the days are too long or the days are too short, and it's either too hot or it's too cold, and that's why most of our Yom Tovim come up around the equinox. Half day, half night, not too hot, not too cold. We Jews do better with balance. Extremes are not good for us. And the summer is just a time of extremes. The days are too long. They added in daylight saving times just to make it worse. So like the sun never sets. It's like, just goes on and on forever. Very, very difficult thing to be able to have. Yeah. And people sleep too late. Notice this very often. Even Yeshiva Bachram comes the summertime. They sleep late. People sleep a lot and wake up late. Go to sleep late. People eat too much during the summer. The cuisine of choice is barbecue. There is no USDA suggested amount of Frankfurters, hamburgers, French fries, coleslaw, potato salad. It doesn't exist. It's to an extreme. After a barbecue, you can find people, they're just sweating fat. It's just, just terrible. Just extreme. Everything is extreme. It's too much. And you need balance. So the sun is blazing. But Tisha B'Av, that's the time of Churban, and less than a week later, we celebrate the fact that we can't collect the wood for the woodpile anymore because the sun is losing its power, which means the Umas HaOlam are starting to lose their power, and it's getting shorter and shorter and shorter. And now we have the Shiva de Nechemta. We have the 7 weeks of Nechama as we go to the equinox. And the sun is getting less and less. And the leaves are turning colors. And it's starting to change. And we can see the Nechama. We can see that the nations of the world don't have the power over us that they used to. We need Nechama. We've gone through some very hard times. And every now and then we look at it and it looks like, wow, things are great. Things are great. And then the moon begins to wane. And so during the year when that happens, when the moon becomes less and the sun becomes more powerful, that brings us the Churban in the summer. And then it starts to become less and less and less, and we set ourselves closer and closer to the equinox, where things are half and half the way they're supposed to be. That balance between Ahava and Yira, that balance between everything in the world that's supposed to be carefully balanced, equilibrium. And it's very hard to do. Very hard to do. All right? Gedolei Torah, you'll find, can keep that balance. A lot of people can't. When you're a teacher, you have to keep that balance. Kids don't know what to do when the teacher comes in a bad mood and like, nobody bother me. Yeah, teacher has to be teacher every single day. It has to be the same thing. Yeah. Lahavdil. Joe DiMaggio, he was a famous ball player, and he retired early when he was still towards the height of his career. And they said to him, Joe, why are you retiring? You still have many years left. And he said, because when a kid comes to Yankee Stadium, he deserves to see Joe DiMaggio, and I can't give that to him anymore. I can be good, but I'm not what I should be. And they deserve to see it. Yeah? You have to know that we have to try to achieve to become the best that we can and to be able to grow. And we live in a world where the Jewish people wax and wane. And in Mitzvah Hashem, there's going to come a time when we'll have a true nechama, and that's the nechama. The nechama is to know that we are getting out of the tragedy, to be able to achieve that equilibrium, to be the best that we can be, where everything is in balance. It's very interesting. Simcha does not mean happy. Simcha means copacetic. There must be a better word for it than that, but copacetic means you're in balance. Everything's good. Yeah, I'm fine. Everything's good. When you go really like joyful, that's sason. That's beyond. But simcha is balance. Yeah? Sasan goes beyond that, goes more happy. But simcha is ezu asher sameach b'chelko. I'm happy. I'm set. I have an equilibrium in my life. That's what we have to really shoot for. That's what we have to all try to achieve. So we're hoping to have a nechama, and the nechama is that the cavalry is on its way. You know, we have to hold on till tomorrow. Yeah, and I had a Ziggy poster when I ran NCSY on my wall, and it said, "It's always darkest before it's pitch black." That just because I'm a Polish Yid, as we already established. That's the way we look at life. But what it means is that from the darkness comes the light. We need the courage to get through the dark times. We need the courage to be able to handle when things are not going right in our life, and know that there's something waiting beyond this. There's going to be something, there's going to be a tomorrow. I had a very interesting conversation with these two high school girls. I won't tell you where they live, but there is this phone system. My details are scanty, so I can't give you enough information, but this is how they described it to me. We started during Zoom. It was sort of like group calls. We'd call up a number and everybody would be on the line. So one of them is still going in Lakewood. There are people on it 24 hours a day, boys and girls, from boys and girls. And they're talking all the time. All the time. And one of these girls was on it, and she realized that this was not healthy, and she got off it. But her friend is addicted. And she's sitting there talking to these boys, and etc. And she recognizes it's messing her up. How does she get out of this? She's 15 years old. I said, Ezu chacham haroya zonolad. You know who's smart? Someone who can see the future. You're stuck where you are right now in high school. And that's why back in Europe, boys used to get married at their bar mitzvah. So mistama to a 12-year-old girl. You know? Rabbi Meir says, I got married at 14. If I got married at 13, I could spit the satan in the eye. It's not good for high school kids to be single. It's nothing good comes out of it. They should get married. They tell a story with the Satmar Rebbe, where they said, we have in shul a ofruf, a chassan having his ofruf, and we have a bar mitzvah boy. Who should get the maftir? He said, whoever's older. You know, because that's what it used to be. They get married at their bar mitzvah. You save money on a big party. You know, you knock off both parties at the same time. You know. In fact, somebody told me that he has a good friend. It says Yosef Brown. His good friend was Todris Miller, from Gateshead. And the two of them were complaining that they have trouble with shidduchim. He says, yeah, my daughter, she's been going out, I have trouble finding a shidduch, And Todris Miller says, yeah, I have the same problem with my son, he's going out, I can't going out. And finally, the little light bulb went on over their head, and they're like, hey, you have a son, I have a daughter, maybe this will work out. They went out, they got engaged. So this is the part of the story I find interesting. He said to the boy, because the father of the girl buys the chassan a watch. He goes, hey, I got you a watch for your bar mitzvah. Is it still working? I have to get you another one? How's that one? That one's good? So this way you only have to get one watch for the bar mitzvah and for the wedding. You could knock them both off, yeah? So so she says she's addicted. She doesn't know what to do. So I spoke to her about marriage, and I said, Ezu chachama roisa nolad. And she agreed with me. You're right. I agree that this is going to have a negative impact on me, but I can't stop. Why? Because you're living in the here and now. You're not looking ahead. I've told this story before for sure. I was talking to a girl in seminary, second year. She said to me, I don't know if I want to be frum anymore. I said, okay, let's work it through. What next year going to look like? That wasn't too hard. The year after that, also wasn't too hard. What's going to be when you're 30? Also pretty good. 40? More difficult. 50? She said, I don't like the way it's turning out. I said, let's keep going. 60? 70? 80? She said, okay, what's the question I have to be from? But you don't do that. You look at today. I only think about today. I don't think about consequences. Everybody knows this. I've spoken about it before. They did a study where they took the little kids and they put a marshmallow in front of them and said, you can eat the marshmallow. But if you wait 10 minutes, I'll give you another marshmallow. You'll have 2 marshmallows. And then they tracked these people through life. And the ones who ate the marshmallows right away did not have successful lives. Not successful careers, not successful relationships. And the one who was able to wait, they were successful in everything they did. Because you have to look ahead. That was only 10 minutes ahead. So, you have to be able to see ahead. So in the darkness, you have to be able to see the light. The laugh that Rabbi Akiva gives when the Chachamim see a fox coming out of the Kodesh HaKadoshim, and they all cried and he laughed. And he says, if the negative nevuahs came true, then the positive ones will for sure come true. You're looking at the darkness, I'm seeing the light that comes after it. There'll be a tomorrow, there'll be a better time coming. There'll be a better world. And that takes us 7 weeks, 3 weeks for us to warn that our poor decisions are going to lead to destruction. And once you lead to destruction, I've mentioned this before, when I ran NCSY, so I used to take things to the printer, and the printer had handouts. He would give you like little to-do notes, pads, and things like that. And one of them was this little funny thing, you know it's going to be a bad day when? You know it's going to be a bad day when there's a 60-minute news crew waiting in your office. You know it's going to be a bad day when, One of the things they said is, it's going to be a bad day when you wake up face down naked in the gutter. That was maybe 45 years ago I read that. I think about it all the time. What was the series of events that led to this? How do I get home? I don't have bus fare. You wake up face down naked in the gutter. There had to have been a whole series of very bad decisions that brought you to that point. And so there were a whole series of bad decisions that brought us to the Churban. That brings it to Tisha B'Av. And after a week, the sun starts losing its power. And we can look ahead and see Rosh Hashanah and see Yom Kippur and see ourselves as Malachim and see ourselves in the Sukkah and take ourselves out of where we are. That's in the Chama. That's what we have to be working on now. And the Mitzvah Hashem will all be zocheh to an emesa nechama. And that brings us to the question and answer portion of our program. By Anonymous. I talk to my mother on the phone on most days, often for 1 to 2 hours. My husband feels it's too much. How do you balance K'vod Harav with your responsibilities to your husband, children, and a sink full of dishes? Wow, what a terrible, terrible dilemma. The only dilemma that's worse than this is, how does a husband manage his time towards his parents when his wife is upset? And the reason that's more of a problem is halachically. Halachically, if a woman has to choose between her parents and her husband, her obligation to her husband comes first. But that's not true by a husband. So for him, it's even worse. Yeah. Having said that, I had a husband who said to me once, I don't know what to do because, my wife makes certain demands on me and my mother makes certain demands on me, and how do I choose? I said, you have to choose your wife. She can't feel like she's playing second fiddle, obviously. That does not exclude you or exempt you from the mitzvah of K'vod Harav. So how do you balance these things? Like a fiddler on the roof. It's very hard. It's very, very hard. And obviously it helps if everybody's on the same page. Sometimes they're not. Sometimes they're not. I did not know that my father despised my mother's mother because he never let us know. But she opposed their marriage and gave him grief for many, many years. And my father was very hurt and very insulted. I remember, everybody gives advice based on their own experiences. And when I was engaged, he says to me, whatever you do, don't live with your parents or your in-laws. Get your own place, even if it's a tiny little place. You don't want to feel like he says, when I got married, I lived with your mother's mother. Her father had already passed away when she was a teenager. And I did whatever I could to get out of there and get my own place. Very hard. Very hard. To do it. But I never knew this. In fact, I remember one time she came to visit, and one of my brothers didn't want to come out of his room, and he said, she's your grandmother? How many years you're going to have a grandmother? You go out there right now and you say hello. And I didn't know that he had such problems with her because he shielded us from that. So if everyone's on the same page, then it's great. The problem is when they're not. Right? So sometimes, especially when a parent is elderly or sick or needy, and they're depending on a particular kid, and the spouse is not ba'ad, it's very difficult. A very difficult thing to balance. So I'm going to give you a piece of advice that's easier said than done. And sometimes I give advice and people say to me, easier said than done. I said, everything is easier said than done except for Kriya Shema. That's the only thing that's easy, just as easy to say it as to do it. But everything else is easier said than done, of course. And that is that you have to learn how to develop good conversational techniques. And to try to executives know how to do this, how to steer a conversation towards a conclusion. Now, I say easier said than done because there are certain people who will not be steered. They barely stop for breath. There is no break in the conversation. So the only thing I can suggest you do at that point is put the phone on speaker and do what you have to do. I've had people like that who would keep me on the phone for a very long time. I'd put the phone on speaker and I would do whatever it is I had to do because I just don't have that many hours in a day. And I have other obligations and I have other things I need to do. So you have to be realistic. Yeah? I'm going to tell you something else. That is very important. You have to daven for siyata d'shmaya. Because somebody said to me once, there are certain people, when they're ready to walk out the door, suddenly the phone rings and it's somebody that you have to take the call, and you're stuck. So when that happens, okay, now you miss getting to Seder, you miss getting to this, husbands will often find that their wives want to discuss a very important issue just when they're about to walk out the door, to go to a binyan, to go to a shiur, to go to work, whatever it is. It's at that moment. That's and so you have to learn how to balance that. You have to learn how to, without the other person feeling insulted, saying this is a very important topic. I don't want to rush it because I have to go now. But, it's tonight we're going to talk this through and make sure, And if you can do that. But I have certain people who I say, okay, I really have to go now, and they just keep talking. And, sometimes I have no choice. I have to just end the conversation abruptly because they don't get it. Not everybody gets social cues. You have to figure out how to do it. So, I've told this story over beforehand, that when the Twin Towers went down, Rabbi Moshe Shapiro was telling anybody who would listen that this is the end, this is Gog and Magog, the beginning of Gog and Magog. I said to him at the time I was teaching in Or Sameach, I said, so usually these people come in and we slowly get them to take class and to keep Shabbos, so should I tell them like time's up, you better become from now because it's over, So he gave me a look. And then when I was leaving, he said, Bevadai, we have to do what we have to do. Ani medaber po, up here. In your head, you have to know, Ein od milevadai. And so when it comes to respecting parents, the main thing is I can never treat my parents with disrespect. I may not always be able to do everything that they want, right? None of my parents are alive, but I did, certainly the best I can to be a constant disappointment to them in almost everything that I did, every decision I made, everything I did. Constant disappointment. But I did the best that I could. Not true. Not true. I'm lying. Yeah, if I could go back and live my life over, I would have been a much better son. But I spent a lot of time kvetching, like every kid does about their parents, Okay. No, they weren't the easiest people in the world. My father had one educational technique, that was to take off his belt and beat you. You know what I mean? When he was verbally abusive, that was already positive. There was no beatings. But okay, listen, he gave me life. He did. He sent me to yeshiva. Bought me clothes, gave me a roof over my head, bought me a car. He did so many things for me. My whole life. And I kvetch because that's what kids do. If I could be my adult self and go back, I obviously would have done things differently. So we have to up here have kibbud aveim. We have to have constant respect for our parents. Whether or not we can do everything that we need to do, that obviously we need to negotiate, and especially if husbands and wives have to be on the same page when we do this. And that's why there are certain people where I've seen this, where either the girl's parents are abusive to the boy or vice versa, and they say, I'm not going there. I will not go. I'm not going to go and be abused. And either the wife or the husband go separately, go alone. Sometimes they tell their parents. They say, how come she didn't come? Why didn't she come? How come he's not here? Says, because you treat him poorly and he doesn't want to come. Cry baby. Tell him to toughen up. Okay, that's an approach, But okay, I understand. I understand that if people want to be, difficult, etc. But we need to negotiate it. They're our parents, and we need to do the best that we can to try to do it. Ideally, the spouse also, kaved es avicha ve'es imecha. One of the esim teaches us also in-laws. We should be machabed them, and as best as we can. A person has to make that effort, and it's hard sometimes. But if a meaningful life was easy, everybody would do it. And that's it for this week. If you want to find out more about the show, you can go to my website, RabbiOrlofsky.com. You can ask a question, leave a comment, sponsor an episode, please. We're almost out of sponsors. You can sponsor a question and answer. You can sponsor Parsha in 5. Is that 5? I'm doing the Vulcan salute for some reason. Yeah, Parsha in 5. You can sign up for one of the online shiurim, and that's it until next time. I am David Orlofsky, and this has been the Rabbi Orlofsky Show.
It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Torah and Simcha, ready to go. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Knowledge and wisdom will help you grow. Lots of fun in every episode. And we don't have to rhyme. No, we don't. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show on RabbiOrlofsky.com. Torah, anytime, YouTube and more. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Torah and Simcha, ready to go. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Till next time, till we meet again. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show.